3. Hidden shadow abilities that prove you are a dark chosen one. Most people spend their lives chasing the light, convinced that spiritual power only comes from peace, love, and positive affirmations. But that's not the whole truth, not even close. There is another path, more ancient, more primal, more real. And if you're watching this, it's because a part of you already knows that path is yours. You've felt the pull your whole life, the feeling that something deep inside you doesn't quite fit into the narrative of light and ascension that's been sold to the masses. You feel things too intensely. You see things others don't. You question everything, especially the parts of yourself you've been told are wrong, too much, or dangerous. What if I told you that those exact traits, those deep, uncomfortable energies you've been hiding, aren't your weakness? They are your proof, your signal, the evidence that you are a dark chosen one, and buried inside you are hidden shadow abilities that the world never taught you to master, because they're terrified of what you'd become if you did. There are 3 primary shadow abilities that mark a dark chosen one. These are not learned in books. They don't require certifications. They awaken through suffering, through silence, through inner fire. They're activated when life has stripped you down so completely that the only thing left standing is the truth. The first ability is energetic sight. You know exactly what I mean if you've ever walked into a room and felt everything, not just the mood, the truth behind it, people's thoughts, their intentions, the hidden tension between them, the lie they're telling with a smile on their face. You feel it all in your gut, your chest, your bones, and no matter how much you try to brush it off, it doesn't leave. This isn't imagination. This is perception beyond the veil. And it's not random. It's a finely tuned psychic instrument.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But here's the twist. Society has trained you to doubt it, to shut it down. You're being dramatic. You're too sensitive. Don't jump to conclusions. Have you heard those words before? That was the programming. Because if you trusted your energetic sight, you'd see through the illusions that keep this world spinning. You'd stop tolerating relationships built on manipulation. You'd walk away from systems that profit off your disconnection. You'd become sovereign. And they can't monetize that. The elite understand this. The real ones, the ones behind the curtains, use energetic sight to negotiate power, manipulate events, and bend timelines. But you were born with it as an organic gift. The difference is they train it, you suppress it. So I need to ask you something now. What would happen if you stopped questioning what you feel and started trusting it fully? The second hidden ability is emotional transmutation. This is the one that causes the most pain, until you realize what it really is. You're not just emotional, you're a vessel for collective energy. Rage, grief, shame, they move through you like storms, often for no apparent reason. You cry and don't know why. You feel like you're drowning in something invisible. And because of this, you might have believed you're unstable, broken, or cursed. But in truth, you're a spiritual alchemist. The world has no idea how to process its own pain, so it unconsciously sends it to people like you. Not because you're weak, but because you're built for it. Your body is designed to absorb, feel, and alchemize what others avoid. This isn't easy. It will exhaust you if you're not trained. But when you understand it, when you start building energetic boundaries and stop taking on what isn't yours, something insane happens. You begin to transform that pain into power, into presence, into frequency, into healing. Not just for yourself, but for others. You walk into rooms and transmute density without saying a word. People feel lighter around you. They don't know why, but you do. It's because you've made peace with the shadow they've been running from. That's not therapy, that's sorcery. It's energetic mastery. And here's the deepest part. The world doesn't reward this gift. It doesn't see it. There's no applause for emotional alchemists. But your impact is immeasurable. The people who suddenly feel like they can breathe when they're near you, that's not by accident. That's your gift working. You've been doing it your whole life, even when you didn't know it had a name. So now the question becomes, are you ready to stop hiding that power and start directing it? The third hidden shadow ability is the most feared and also the most liberating, the power of disruption. As a dark chosen one, your mere existence threatens the status quo, not because you're trying to be difficult, but because you carry a frequency that exposes everything fake. You speak truths that pierce like arrows. You ask questions that dismantle illusions, and people either hate you or worship you for it, sometimes both. You've probably noticed that your presence alone brings up discomfort in others. That's not about you, that's about what you activate in them. This power makes you a living mirror, and most people aren't ready to see themselves. But your soul isn't here to play small or keep people comfortable. You're here to shake the collective awake. That's why you felt misunderstood. That's why people project onto you. That's why systems have tried to silence you. Because deep down, you've always known. When you speak, things shift. When you act, timelines change. That when you decide to stand fully in your shadow power, without shame, without filter, the game ends, illusions die, truth begins, and reality starts to bend around you. So now ask yourself, truly and honestly, have I been minimizing my gift of disruption just to stay safe in a world I came here to change? Because the moment you stop doing that, everything starts. Shadowborn, purpose forged, how to wield your dark gifts without burning yourself out. Once you begin to see these shadow abilities for what they really are, not flaws but encoded strengths, there comes an equally critical realization. Just because you have these gifts doesn't mean they've been integrated. In fact, the more potent your power, the more chaotic your life can feel before that power is understood. Many dark chosen ones spend years drowning in their own gifts, mistaking them for curses. Energetic sight becomes paranoia. Emotional transmutation becomes depression. Disruptive truth becomes isolation. Not because the abilities are wrong, but because no one ever taught you how to wield them. You were born shadowborn, yes, but your purpose is forged. It's refined through fire. It demands conscious practice, otherwise your power burns you instead of lighting your path. Let's start with what almost no one talks about, the need for spiritual stamina. You weren't born to carry ordinary energy. Your frequency is a weapon, a catalyst, a wave of wake up in a sleeping world. But just like a lightning rod, you can only channel that power sustainably if your vessel is prepared. If you're not grounded, your gifts will feel like chaos. If your nervous system is overloaded, your vision will turn into anxiety. This isn't about being weak, it's about being wired for voltage, and voltage needs structure. You can't build temples from raw fire. You have to refine the flame into shape. So the first step is embodiment. You've probably heard that word, but let's go deeper into what it really means for a dark chosen one. Embodiment is not just being in your body, it's being in your power without flinching. It's feeling your rage rise and letting it breathe without lashing out. It's honoring your grief without needing to fix it or run from it. It's allowing your knowing to speak through you without apologizing for how loud it gets. You don't transcend your shadow, you integrate it. You let it sit at your table, not rule your house. And the more you do that, the less your power leaks, the more stable your field becomes, and suddenly the chaos that once overwhelmed you becomes fuel. Clean, focused, potent. Next is energetic hygiene. If your gifts are open but your field is porous, you'll burn out fast. Think about how often you feel drained even after a simple conversation. That's not just being tired, that's energetic mismanagement. You're reading frequencies, absorbing tension, processing psychic data without filtering it. Just because you can feel everything doesn't mean you're supposed to. Mastery means being able to tune your channel, choose when to open, choose when to close. That doesn't mean shutting down your heart, it means protecting it like a sacred temple. How often do you clear your field, not just with sage or a crystal, but with intention, breath, focus? Do you seal your aura before you sleep? Do you cleanse after intense social contact? These are not just rituals, they're survival tools for the dark chosen one. Then we have purpose discipline. This is what separates awakened chosen ones from wandering vessels. Your shadow gifts aren't meant to stay internal, they're meant to serve. You've already been a healer in secret, listening to people who've never listened to themselves. You've already been a breaker of patterns, simply by existing authentically in rooms full of masks. But now it's time to channel that power with precision. Purpose doesn't just fall from the sky, it's claimed, sharpened, directed. What would your life look like if you stopped reacting and started designing your expression like a ritual? Ask yourself this: where does my fire naturally go when I stop suppressing it? What does my truth want to build, not just destroy? Because that's what burns out most dark chosen ones, not the gift itself, but the lack of aim. A sword, no matter how divine, cuts wildly without a hand to hold it. You need an outlet, a sacred task. Whether that's through creative work, teaching, holding space, building systems, writing, guiding, disrupting, your power needs to move. If you don't give it conscious space, it'll tear through unconscious spaces. You'll attract chaos just to feel like something is moving. But you can rewrite that story now. You can become the conductor instead of the storm. Let's also name the hardest part: loneliness. Shadow abilities isolate you, not because you're broken, but because you feel too much, know too much, see too much. The world isn't calibrated to your frequency yet, but that doesn't mean your power is meant to be hidden. It means it's meant to be anchored first. You're not here to blend in, you're here to build a new grid. And once you stabilize in your truth, your soul family finds you not through effort, but through resonance. You don't need 1,000 people, you need the right few who see you in your fullness and don't flinch. So here's what I want you to ask now with full honesty. Have I built a life that supports my power, or one that silences it, because your life structure is either a container or a cage. And when you commit to living from your shadow gifts consciously, everything must shift. That includes your habits, your rituals, your relationships, your work. You can't hold this kind of energy in systems that were built for numbness. And you're not here to adjust to the world, you're here to adjust the frequency of the world through your presence, reclaiming the forbidden self, the final door between you and full activation. There is a part of you that you've never fully met, not because it's hiding, but because it's been buried under years of conditioning, rejection, shame, and fear. It's the version of you that didn't care what people thought, the one who spoke before thinking, the one who moved with instinct, not strategy, the one who could sense lies in the air and knew when something wasn't right before there was any proof. That version of you, the forbidden self, is the key to everything, and until you reclaim it, your power will stay trapped behind layers of spiritual etiquette and polite awakening. You can do the meditations, say the mantras, align your chakras, but if you haven't re-invited the wild, unapologetic, truth-bearing, edge-balking you back to the throne of your being, then your shadow gifts remain locked in potential. This is the part of the journey no one wants to talk about. The forbidden self is messy, unfiltered. It doesn't play by the rules. It doesn't want to ascend above, it wants to dive deeper within. It's not seeking to be healed, it wants to be heard. And most people avoid this part of themselves because it doesn't fit the spiritual image they're trying to uphold. But that's exactly why it holds the final key, because when you can integrate the you that doesn't care about fitting in, when you stop abandoning the parts of yourself that threaten your image, you begin to access a power that no longer needs external approval to validate its existence. That's when activation becomes embodiment. So what is this forbidden self really? It's the part of you that contains all the traits you've been taught to suppress. The rage, the lust, the rebellion, the obsession, the hunger for more, the coldness that arises when you see through people's masks, the voice in your head that says, "This isn't it. There's something more." You've been conditioned to see these traits as problems to fix. But what if they were actually codes to decode? What if they were initiators, showing you the power you've been disowning? Let's make it real. How often do you feel the impulse to say something completely honest, but you don't? How often do you sense someone's energy is off, but you play along because it would be impolite to speak up? How often do you feel fire in your chest, knowing you're meant to do something bolder, louder, more raw, but you suppress it to keep your life stable? Every time you do that, you strengthen the false self. You create an internal fracture, and eventually the pressure builds. Anxiety, fatigue, burnout, numbness, all symptoms of the forbidden self being buried alive. But when you turn toward that part of you, not as an enemy, but as a messenger, everything changes. You begin to hear your truth in its original voice, unedited, uncompromised, and you start to realize that your greatest power was never in your perfection, it was in your permission. The permission to be whole. That includes the parts of you that are still raw, still primal, still unsure, still furious. Those parts are not blocks, they are bridges. Now, here's where most people get stuck. They think reclaiming the forbidden self means becoming reckless, impulsive, or chaotic. But that's only if you act from the wound. When you act from integration, the forbidden self becomes the most precise, aligned, truth-telling compass you've ever had. Your shadow stops controlling you and starts informing you. You begin to operate from a place where instinct and insight meet. And from that place, you no longer have to perform your power, you simply are it. But to get there, you have to ask yourself some brutal questions, like, what have I been too afraid to admit I actually want? What emotion have I been suppressing because I thought it would make me unlovable? Where have I been pretending to be healed just to avoid the truth of how much I still feel? This level of honesty shatters spiritual masks. But it's the only way to reclaim yourself fully, because your forbidden self isn't waiting for your enlightenment, it's waiting for your acceptance. Not so it can take over, but so it can merge with your higher self and create something real. And that union between your light and shadow, your divine and primal, your sacred and your savage, is the final initiation. When you pass through that door, you stop being in awakening and start walking as awakened. You don't talk about your power, you radiate it. You don't try to change people, you activate them just by being yourself. You don't seek belonging, you create resonance. So here is the final, most important question you must ask yourself. What part of me have I been disowning that is actually the source of my full spiritual authority? Because the world doesn't need more half-lit souls reciting spiritual phrases, it needs dark chosen ones who have walked through every layer of themselves and come out whole, stepping into shadow leadership, how to walk as the one they said you could never be. That moment, quiet, unglamorous, but irreversible, when you stop waiting for someone to recognize you and you start walking as the version of yourself they tried to convince you didn't exist. That moment is the beginning of shadow leadership. Not the kind that demands titles, followers, or public acclaim, but the kind that changes frequencies by presence alone. Shadow leadership is not about leading crowds, it's about leading energy. It's about standing in such radical integrity with your whole self, light and dark, sacred and raw, that the world around you either rises to meet your vibration or falls away entirely. This is the final step of the dark chosen one's path. Not ascension in the way most people think, rising above, floating beyond, transcending discomfort, but a deeper, more embodied descent into truth. You're not rising out of the world, you're sinking deeper into your role within it. Not as a preacher, not as a perfect person, but as a living transmission of what happens when someone stops hiding their power and starts embodying it. Shadow leaders don't speak to impress, they speak to awaken. Their words don't entertain, they pierce. Their silence doesn't make people comfortable, it creates space for everything unspoken to rise. You may not have realized it yet, but you've already been doing this. In rooms where people begin to fidget when you enter, in relationships that collapse because you no longer play along with falsehoods, in conversations where your presence makes people confess things they've never admitted aloud. That's not accidental. That's frequency in motion, and it's time you stop mistaking it for being too much. The truth is, they always feared you would remember who you are, that you would stop twisting yourself to be palatable, that you would reclaim the full spectrum of your being and stop shrinking to protect others from their own denial. Shadow leadership begins when you choose to be fully seen, even if it means standing alone. when your commitment to your truth becomes stronger than your addiction to being liked, when you understand that peace isn't the absence of discomfort, it's the presence of alignment. But here's what you must know. This path will not hand you easy rewards. It demands everything. It will strip away every false identity you've clung to for safety. It will test your ability to hold presence in chaos. It will challenge you to lead by embodiment, not ego. You will lose people. You will face resistance. You will confront the parts of you still afraid of your own reflection. But through all of it, something holy begins to build in your bones. A kind of sovereignty that no external power can offer you. That's when your impact begins. Not because you tried to become a leader, but because you became the message. You didn't quote healing, you were healing. You didn't talk about truth, you carried it in your frequency. You didn't ask to be followed, but people began to orbit you anyway, drawn to something they couldn't name but could feel in their soul. This is shadow leadership, and it's your calling, not in some distant future, but now, in how you walk, in how you speak, in what you're willing to no longer tolerate in your field. Every room you enter is an initiation. Every moment is a choice. Will I collapse into old patterns, or will I walk as the one they said I could never be? So ask yourself, right now, as clearly as you ever have, what version of myself must die for my true leadership to begin? Because once that version is laid to rest, what rises from the ashes isn't just a healed person, it's a legend. A dark chosen one who didn't just awaken, but embodied the fire that was always theirs to carry.